And they know that Joe has been incapacitated severely for at least a year, probably two, and probably more. And they know that he won't survive another 4 years. And I think they've gotten to the point of recognizing they're not even going to be able to get him across the finish line. They know what needs to be done, but they need to build the narrative in order to support the move. They needed a public humiliation, a public meltdown that was so objectively outrageous that even the people are going to say, yeah, it's time to swap him out. And it's going to happen sooner than later, I think.
The total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
You're saying that basically all of his aides set him up for such a failure. All of the clips of him looking the wrong way, falling off the stage and all that, and everyone was involved?
Everyone behind the scenes had to have known for at least a year, probably 2 years. He's the symbol of the American decline. Trump genuinely feels bad for Joe Biden, but feels genuine sadness for the state of his country. Trump may be old, but healthy, sharp. You stand those two men side by side, they're not comparable human beings. One is a functional brain, and the other one is dysfunctional. It was actually sad to watch. Every time he spoke, it was a highlight of madness. It was a highlight of how incompetent the man is. You realize it's no longer a government for the people and by the people. Right now, it's siphoning off, profiteering as much as they can from American taxpayer dollars for their globalist agendas. And Joe Biden is the figurehead, the symbol of that decline of the American dream.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is David Frei, aka Viva Frei, the lawyer turned social media star and political commentator. You emerged as an outspoken critic of Canada's extreme COVID lockdown measures, and in the summer of 2022, made the bold decision to relocate your family to Florida, believing it was no longer a healthy environment to raise children. You have over 1 million followers on social media and over 250 million views, and have moved your efforts from YouTube to Rumble in order to continue without fear of censorship. You believe a war is being waged on conservative values, and the censorship of free speech is morphing into the suppression of free thought. You have been disappointed and shocked by President Trump's recent conviction, saying it does irreparable harm to the fabric of America. David, welcome to London Real.
Thank you for having me. That's a fair synopsis. I didn't realize I'm up to 250 million views. That's a big number.
I counted. It's a big number. Look, it's great to have you here. Last time we were on air together, I was in Austin, Texas. I was at InfoWars with Alex Jones. We were actually streaming our brand new documentary film called We Will Not Be Silenced, which is about censorship and the fight we had with YouTube in 2020 when they ended up deplatforming us. That's actually been premiered on Twitter, X. It just crossed 10 million views. And it's very relevant because you were on Alex Jones to talk about President Trump's potential conviction. And then later you came back to talk about the conviction. I want to get into that, but we have to talk about the topic du jour, which is the debate last night. I want to get your thoughts on it. Here, I definitely expected a mediocre performance by the president, but to see all the mainstream news media, including the liberal news media, seeming to agree that it was a total failure, I want to get your thoughts. You've said, quote, during your live stream, holy shit, Joe is out on his feet and we're 5 minutes in. This is already an abject disaster for Joe. You went on to say Joe is going to withdraw or be forced out within a month. Viva Frei, what did you see happen last night?
It's fun to play, commentator. It was actually sad to watch because we joke about the elder abuse and we joke about how Dr. Jill Biden is using her hubby as a political tool. It was sad. You're looking at like someone who should be in a home, who should be. I'm not saying this to be funny. I'm saying this because he's a human and he should be treated with dignity, even in his second or third childhood. It was sad. He was not blinking. I was going through again this morning, trying to pull some highlights and pull some clips. Every time he spoke, it was a highlight of madness. It was a highlight of how incompetent the man is, and we saw it in real time. There was no spinning it. It genuinely looked like Dana Bash and Jake Tapper were shocked. Everyone was joking how they're going to jack him up on Adderall, jack him up on whatever medications you give to people suffering from dementia, so at least they can function for a small time frame, a small window. He was out from the first second, and it's a very sad state of affairs where it's party over country for the capital D Democrats. But I mean, from substance to delivery, it was such a disaster that I'm going to look like the smartest guy in the room for having predicted that this might not have been done in order to set up Trump. This might have been done in order to set up Joe Biden, because everyone behind the scenes had to have known this was the case for at least a year, probably 2 years. And if they know they need to replace Joe Biden, but they can't do it until it's politically palpable among the supporters of the party, they needed a public humiliation, a public meltdown that was so incontrovertible, so objectively outrageous that even the people are going to say, yeah, it's time to swap him out. And now it's politically expedient to do so. I think that was the goal beforehand, and I called it beforehand. And I actually put a little money on my mouth beforehand, and it played out exactly as I thought. And then some. The market's predicting who the presidential candidate is going to be, the nominee for the Democrats. It went from 87 or 89 cents for Joe Biden to as low as 55 cents for Joe Biden. Now it's sort of plateaued around 60. And Gavin Newsom went from 6, 7 to 12 cents to 20 some odd cents. And now he's sort of plateaued at 20. But everybody knows what needs to be done. The writing is on the wall, and it's going to happen sooner than later, I think.
And so for people that maybe aren't versed in this theory, that you're saying that basically all of his aides set him up for such a failure that now it's incontrovertible, you have to have someone else. We needed this death blow to do it. All of the clips of him looking the wrong way on D-Day and falling off the stage and all of that wasn't enough. It had to be a total incontrovertible failure, and everyone was involved in the party.
They've known about this. I mean, first of all, everybody's known about this since, say, 2018, 2020. It's probably why Congress or the Senate was looking to get the audio of the meeting with him and I always say Ben-Hur, but it's Robert Hur. They want the audio because the transcript lies, especially when it's been falsified. Everybody behind the scene knows that Joe has been incapacitated severely for at least a year, probably two, and probably more. And they know that he won't survive another 4 years. And I think they've gotten to the point of recognizing they're not even going to be able to get him across the finish line so they can, 25th Amendment him in his first year and replace him with Kamala. And so they know what needs to be done, but they need to build the narrative in order to support the move. I sincerely believe that that's what they've been doing. And they've been almost in a form of persuasion or mind control or brainwashing, setting it up as though Gavin Newsom looks like a younger Joe Biden, talks like a younger Joe Biden, and has been acting very presidential. He's been meeting with world leaders for the last little while, engaging in interstate political commentary when, as a governor of a failed state of California, he should be sticking to his own state, meeting with President Xi. And so and sporting the aviator glasses, Joe Biden's dark Brandon glasses. So in my own mind, and maybe it's seeing dots or connecting dots that don't require connection or don't actually connect, but I've been saying that they've been setting this up so that even in the spirit of younger voters, they're going to say, well, Gavin Newsom kind of looks like Joe Biden, and we're going to be just as happy to vote for him. But they needed this to happen. And it was the only way to make sure that people understand Joe is unfit to be sitting as president now. He's certainly unfit to be re-elected.
And the proof in your mind is perhaps those first 5 minutes or first 10 minutes when you compare that with a State of the Union address where you can see that a potentially hopped up Joe can actually function for a while. Here, he couldn't even do the first 5 or 10 minutes, which means in your mind, I guess, they intentionally put him up to just completely fail.
Well, it is amazing. And I almost forgot this thought. For the last, 2 months now, you have Karine Jean-Pierre, she is a DEI hire by her own admission, and people can call me racist for saying it and tough crap for you. She got up on the stand on her first day and highlighted the fact that she was diversity, equity, and inclusion in being the first Black lesbian foreign. I mean, she lifted so many things. I was like, all right, which one relates to your competence? You've been hearing Karine Jean-Pierre for the last, month maybe now, talk about cheap fakes, because all of those videos of Joe Biden dawdling around like a senile old buffoon who's gotten lost from his home, well, those were cheap fakes taken out of context. That was the right lying to the world about Joe Biden's cognitive abilities. And the media, Joe Scarborough running hardcover for him, saying that, Joe's never been sharper. He's only been getting better. Scaramucci, for gosh sake. I said they must have some dirt on Scaramucci. People have been saying Joe Biden is fit, cognitively capable, and all of the videos that we see with our own eyes and hear with our own ears are cheap fakes, or being compared to deep fakes, which aren't even real at all. And then this is what we see. They have been lying to the face of the American people for, at the very least, a year, and most certainly more. Shamelessly, remorselessly, without conscience, these people, there's no other word for it at this point. They're evil. They will exploit the elderly. They will exploit the mentally impaired, like they did with John Fetterman when he was going through his stroke recovery, clinical depression. Run a warm body because that's all we need. They'll exploit children the same way they did Greta Thunberg if it fits the political agenda. And they'll lie to your face as they do it. And yesterday, for anyone who's paying attention, the lies of the last year, the lies of the last month have been shattered so clearly for the world to see that I don't know how these people expect to be taken seriously anymore. And I don't know how they're still in a job. From Karine Jean-Pierre, professional liar, to Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, professional liars, Rachel Maddow, Scaramucci, who's the other one? George Conway on Twitter. All of these people have been lying to the people for political profit, treating them like objects and using them as tools to their political ends. It's an actual sin in the Kantian philosophy of not using people as means to an end philosophy. But evil, it's just evil. And we've seen it now in broad daylight.
What did you make of the CNN moderators? Because again, when you start to look at their behavior, it almost seems like maybe they were in on it as well, because they didn't seem to try to cut him any kind of slack. They didn't seem to go after Trump in any way. They didn't even seem that shocked. I mean, a little bit, but not too shocked at even what was going on. What did you make of them?
Either they changed tune very quickly when it became clear that Joe Biden was going to drown, or this might have been part of the deeper state plot, the replacement of a candidate in a way that will nonetheless potentially maximize the odds of an election. Dana Bash looked genuinely shocked and appalled by what Joe Biden was saying, specifically on the abortion issue. I'm trying to find the highlight where Joe went into this rant about, it started off with abortion, then it ended up with murder of an illegal migrant over the border, and it was incomprehensible. And then you flash back to Dana Bash, and she looks like she is shocked and awed at the absolute abject madness of what she was watching. They did not cut Biden slack. I mean, there's only so much fact checking that they could do, because Trump, he didn't really mention any specific stats or specific issues that would be patently false or require fact checking. Whether or not the Border Patrol endorsed him, they can fact check things like that. But he wasn't setting aside what all of the idiots on Twitter, the Bette Midlers, who else? What's his face? The lunatic guy, Keith Olbermann. Set aside what they were saying on Twitter. He lies, and yet they don't give one example of one of Trump's lies. There wasn't really that much to fact check because they were broader statements of policy. But they weren't letting up on Joe Biden, but he wasn't making any sense. And at some point they just gave up. Like there was an answer where Joe just faded off, and then it was like a dead humiliation silence in the crowd, and they didn't know what to do with it. But they definitely were harder than I thought they were going to be on Joe Biden, but they couldn't have been any harder than just letting him speak.
What did you make of Trump and his reaction to all of that? Do you think he was coached and prepped either to himself or by others to not go for the throat if it was apparent, because Trump seemed to be measured and seemed to try to really look like the reasonable guy? Or do you think that was just his natural reaction?
It's a good question. I mean, undoubtedly, when he says in his earlier campaign stumps, what should I be, the mean Trump or the nice Trump? He looked genuinely sad. And I'm also not saying this to make fun of Joe Biden. You sit there and you compare those two people. They're 2 years apart from each other, 2 or 3 years apart. They are different functions of human beings. Trump may be old, but healthy, sharp, cognitively able. I don't care if he flubs some words every now and again. Everybody flubs their words. But you stand those two men side by side, they're not comparable human beings. One is a functional brain, and the other one is dysfunctional. And I think Trump genuinely, feels bad for Joe Biden, but feels genuine sadness for the state of his country. But you go back to when Trump was on Howard Stern, how long ago now? A decade or maybe more? Where Howard Stern, when he used to be funny and when I used to listen to him, I loathe him now. I can't even hear his voice or look at his beautiful hair. He was saying, like, Trump, you don't need this. You don't want this. Enjoy your golden years. Play golf. Enjoy the fruits of your wealth, the fruits of your labors. And Trump felt compelled to put all of that at risk. I don't think he had any idea of the degree to which he was putting it at risk to save his country. And now you got Trump up there now looking at the lamentable state of America, a country that more closely resembles what they describe as Putin's Russia or Kim Jong-un's North Korea. Weaponized lawfare. I don't even want to call it a two-tier system of justice, just a system of injustice. A laughing stock at the international scale, being shifted out of the position of power in global geopolitics. And he's looking at this old man who can barely string together a sentence and saying, not, I can't believe I'm losing to this guy because he's not, just like, I can't believe this is what our country has come to. And I think he genuinely felt bad for Joe. There was that one part where he says, I didn't even understand what Joe said at the end there, and I don't think he understood either, not to make fun of him, because it's objectively sad and it's objectively disgusting. But whichever persona he took on yesterday, it was the right one. He didn't need to needle and dig like I suggested he should have at the Ashley Biden diary, although he basically did make that point that Biden lied about the Hunter laptop, and as did everybody else. They've been lying to everybody forever. But whichever persona he channeled, it was the good one.
Yeah, it was hard for me to watch because obviously I've seen all the Biden outtakes, and I am a fan of what Trump said. But at the end of the day, I'm also American, and just to see that was representing this once great country, and the whole world was watching, and then to be reminded that they've basically been watching this for 4 years, it doesn't make you feel very good. Even if it was a victory for the party or the person you think should be the candidate, in a weird way, it was a sad moment and not as celebratory as you thought it would be. And then again, there's the human side too. The guy's obviously just kind of lost, and it's sad. And what a weird range of emotions for a debate.
But Biden represents the demise of America. Now, it's not an irreparable demise. I wouldn't have moved to the States temporarily and potentially permanently if I thought it was in a permanent state of demise. But I lived through Canada as Canada was turned into an international laughingstock, as it lost any and all moral authority to lecture anybody anywhere on anything. And you now are looking at Joe Biden, who is at the helm. He's the symbol of the American decline. There was that movie, Le Déclin de l'Empire Américain, but I don't think it's relevant. The decline of the American empire. He is the symbol of how America has lost its moral influence, its political influence, its economic influence. And you are seeing it now all unraveling under Joe Biden's short 4 years, where America has been shifted out of the leader of global politics. There's unity and coalitions among other nations. There's corruption that America or Biden administration accuses other regimes of implementing, currently being implemented in real time to the degree that other countries are laughing at America. It can and it will be saved because there are more freedom-loving Americans than there are, I would say, operatives of whatever deep state, is profiting from this. And no, it's just you realize it's no longer a government for the people and by the people. Right now, it's governing the people and just siphoning off. Profiteering as much as they can from American taxpayer dollars for their globalist agendas. And Joe Biden is the figurehead, the symbol of that decline of the American dream.
I'm getting some like Manchurian Candidate flashbacks here when you kind of maybe explain what's been really going on with the Democratic Party and how perhaps maybe even they leaked some of those Joe Biden videos to set this whole thing up so they could change candidates, where in a weird way, the right and the left were working towards the same aim in a temporary sense. There's a lot to process here. Do you think Trump won the election last night, bar none, or are there so many more volatile events that can happen in the next 5 months?
Well, I mean, I think he won the election far before. He might have won the election with that Georgia mugshot. I think it's definitive. Like, I'm not even selling my position in Biden not being the Democrat nominee because it's going to end up at zero sooner than later. My concern is, that every fear hides a wish, or be careful what you wish for. If they swap in Gavin Newsom, I don't care how unpopular Gavin Newsom is in certain areas. I don't care how loathsome he is as an individual and how much of a failed politician he is. You've seen it. We've seen it over and over again. They'll literally elect someone who's going through a stroke recovery clinical depression because he's got a capital D in front of his name. So I do have a feeling like maybe not Kamala Harris because she's actually a loathsome human. Gavin Newsom might be able to make a decent run, and they'll say, "Look, we're the responsible party. We've swapped out Joe Biden for a good candidate now, Gavin Newsom," and he might have a chance. But no, I mean, I think Trump, barring something truly catastrophic, which I would not put past anybody in that side of the political aisle, he's won the election. Everybody knows it, and now it might even feel like the CNNs and the MSNBCs are saying, maybe it's not going to be that bad, and maybe we better shift gear just a little bit if we want to retain any relevancy whatsoever in the next 4 years of Donald Trump.
Now, look, it's Friday. It was a really bad day for the Democratic Party. They'll have the weekend to mull it over. Come Monday, do you think it really is the only choice to put Gavin in there? Or do you think that there is a pact, they'll just let it blow over and they'll keep the same narrative and roll him out?
No, it's a done deal. The only question is, how does it happen? Does Joe Biden say it himself? Does he get a medical diagnosis saying that he has to withdraw, despite all of the lies that they told us about his mental acuity, although he never submitted to a mental test? I think it's going to be organic. If it's not, I mean, also, I don't like saying certain things just because it's bad juju in the universe. He's 81 years old. Like Abe Simpson in The Simpsons said, each Matlock could be our last. People die. I mean, that's he's an old man and he's not in a good state. It could be natural, but it's going to be political one way or the other. And the only question is, who's it going to be? Who are the options? Kamala Harris, who's not an option. Gavin Newsom. You got Michelle Obama, who would have been a plausible candidate or a suggestion, but I think she wants to enjoy her retirement years and she doesn't want to sacrifice her golden years like Trump sacrificed his for the country. You got Hillary Clinton, who I think would get. I mean, I don't think Hillary Clinton gets elected if they swap her in. I think people understand the degree of her evil now. Gretchen Whitmer, who she's physically a decent candidate to put on a poster, but a woman who arguably but not arguably staged her own kidnapping to win an election. So I think they swap in Gavin Newsom, and then you have a bit of an election. But I think Trump, it's a done deal. Unless barring something totally unforeseeable, which I don't even want to think about it because it would be cataclysmic.
But it's the devil you know and the devil you don't know. Gavin could bring some breath of fresh air, some new narrative, something.
For all his foibles, he's a sleazy, smarmy politician, and that sells. I mean,
yeah.
Nobody wants an honest guy that they don't think can't be manipulated. So that sells. He speaks well. He's young and charismatic. He just happens to be a failed politician, and I would say not just beyond incompetent, but he's sufficiently detested, from what I'm told, by people who I consider to be smarter than me, that he would not win the election. But he fits all of the check boxes of the stereotypical politician.
Right, and I think the big objection from Democratic voters was they didn't want Biden. Biden had become so embarrassing, so this, so that. So if it's not Biden, already it's a win, and now this guy is at least a politician. He can dress up, he can do the usual things. So it seems like that might be a good option. I want to talk about the conviction because that's when we first met, and then what the aftermath was. You were pretty vehement that day, as was everyone at InfoWars, even though I think I definitely asked you on air before it happened, what was the percentage chance? And I think you said 87% chance he gets convicted. I think you said that. But then afterwards, it still was really emotional. And I think you even said everyone's going to remember where they were that day. Tell me about that day for you. The disconnect between everyone knew it was going to happen, and then when it happened, everyone was surprised, and then aftermath.
It is, I mean, in a way, not to be melodramatic or hyper dramatic. It's like when someone dies, and especially if they've been sort of sick, and you say, "Well, we always knew this day was coming." well, I'll take a dog, and then I'll try not to cry because it reminds me of when my dog, Winston, not the one I have now, but my bull mastiff, we put him to sleep. You knew the day's coming, and you're prepared for it, or you think you are, and then it happens, and then you come back to an empty house, and you expect the dog to be there just reflexively. What happened to Trump, everyone had built themselves up for it. The system's broken, we know it's going to happen. I remember where I was because I was just about to go fishing, and I was outside, I'm just refreshing, and I was like, oh, wow, unanimous conviction on all 34 charges. And I'm like, they've killed something as relates to a spiritual aspect of American society. They successfully killed something in democracy when it worked. It worked in that, not that it's going to work in not getting him elected, it worked in showing us that every society, no matter how evolved and no matter how enlightened, is one generation away from, or even 1 year away from, or one political movement away from descending into Soviet Russia. And it was satisfying. So it happens, and they're like, oh, wow, the dog is dead. And they actually did it. We'll get over it. We'll get another dog. We'll get past this moment. But they did it. They successfully found a man, found the crime, and convicted him on absolute rubbish. They convicted him on what Hillary Clinton and the DNC actually committed. And I'm not saying this is a whataboutism or look at her emails. This is, they convicted their adversaries of the crimes they committed themselves. Trump did not commit any of these so-called crimes. 34 charge felony. This is coming out of, and I repeat it over and over again, the Soros-funded Alvin Bragg prosecution of Donald Trump. The helm of that ship, Juan Merchan, whose daughter is profiting off this persecution, in a trial into which they basically pulled an Alex Jones, stripped the defendant of certain inalienable rights so they could go ahead with this show trial and get a conviction. Trump was convicted for doing literally what Hillary Clinton did, using campaign funds to interfere with an election and then falsify those payments so that they would not be disclosed. Because recall, Hillary Clinton financed the Steele dossier, which was not opposition research, it was just outright lies prepared by foreign assets, financed it, paid for it, concealed that payment, then used her lawyer to submit that Steele dossier to the FBI, who then leaked it to Yahoo, who then published an article on it that the FBI then relied on for the purposes of obtaining unlawful FISA spy warrants on Trump campaign via Carter Page. That's what Clinton did. They charged Trump with having done that, even though the payment to Stormy Daniels, in as much as there was one, was not paid with campaign finances, was not paid with campaign finances, money. And it wasn't concealed because it was invoiced by and paid through legal services. And so they just take victims of their own crimes and convict them of them. And I was like, holy crap, they actually did it. And they made the judicial process into another arm of a weaponized partisan government. And so it's like, what can you do? They've crossed another Rubicon, and it's going to take time to heal from this. But in the meantime, everybody should understand, get the hell out of these hellhole Democrat-run corrupt states. New York being the latest of them. Just get out, because it doesn't matter what you've done. You don't even have to have committed the crime in order for them to convict you of it.
Yeah, again, another kind of sad day for me to realize, I traveled to the United States. I don't go very often, but then, the few days I'm there, I get to see this broken system that you would have never thought could ever have been corrupted in such a way. And then you see evidence. And then behind the scenes, I'll be honest, Viva, it was really trippy, because obviously InfoWars is going crazy. Everybody's jumping back on air. Alex is coming back on air. And in between, the segments, when they're putting the commercial segments, they're telling me, Brian, this is how we felt at our trial, because we couldn't say anything. We couldn't protest. We couldn't push back. It was all decided beforehand. And it was just a really emotional time to just think that this justice system, that we grew up thinking America was always this holier than thou, this better place, this, to realize that it just wasn't anymore. And again, a bit like that debate is just a little sad.
Well, and worse still is that people were cheering it on. Like these idiot lemmings don't understand the hell that they're ushering in. And they think, he's a convicted felon. Low information, partisan and deranged people. I've had a theory now. It was Lord Buckley, Mark Grobert on another part of our internet community, who suggested that this 2016 Trump derangement syndrome is sort of like the MK Ultra 2.0, just like mass hysteria. And they've brainwashed people into ushering in their own demise. So above and beyond, it's one thing to see a corrupt regime doing corrupt things. It's another thing to see the people cheering it on and rejoicing in it. And that was the most repulsive element about it. I appreciate Twitter's probably not representative of everyday people, but then I talked to people from New York and like, yeah, well, he broke the law because he got convicted. It's like, it's a tautology of corruption now. He's guilty because he broke the law. He broke the law, therefore he's guilty. But it's just watching people usher this in and celebrate it that really is the more depressing thing, much like up in Canada when some Canadians were cheering on the invocation of the Emergencies Act to violently suppress the most peaceful protest ever, ratify freezing of bank accounts with no due process, no judicial anything, and people cheer it on thinking that this is somehow progress when it's the descent into tyranny out of which it's difficult to vote yourself.
Yeah, and I
may have said that wrong, but
I want to get to some of the things that you saw in Canada as well. The other thing that I spoke to you on Alex Jones' show was about what happens next. And I remember I asked you about appeals, and then you brought up the Supreme Court. You brought up this immunity decision they would be coming out with. And I'm just curious of your thoughts on kind of all of that. Will there be an appeal on this conviction? I think it's coming up next week. The immunity coming in from Supreme Court, what are we expecting there? Post conviction, what are your thoughts now?
Well, I'm just refreshing to see if there's been an immunity decision released today. There hasn't. Today, there's been two good decisions that have been released. One on the January 6th obstruction charges, the felony obstruction, which was overturned. And I think also from what Rep. Thomas Massey tweeted, the Chevron deference has also been overturned, but I haven't read that decision yet. The New York case is getting tossed on appeal. If not getting, what was the issue recently? It was Judge Merchan who sent a letter to the parties because apparently there was a Facebook post of somebody who said my cousin's on the jury, and she said Trump's getting convicted. Congratulations, guys. I was suspicious of that post to begin with, but it's getting overturned. There's not a question about it because there's a constitutional or a separation of powers issue in there. But the only reason they even took this bogus case, which ought to have been a misdemeanor in the first place, falsification of business records, and they bumped it up to a felony, was by alleging that it violated federal law, even though they couldn't agree on which federal law it violated as the predicate act, which is itself an overturnable error in law. Judge Marchand told the jury, you don't have to unanimously agree on the predicate act that turned this otherwise misdemeanor into a felony. It could be any one of three, and it could be federal election fraud, which there wasn't because the FEC already looked into it. It could be tax fraud, and you need not even derive a tax benefit from the tax fraud. You don't need to agree on which one it was, any one of the three, but if you're unanimous on the guilt, then you get a conviction. That will be overturned. So it's not a question of if, but when. The problem is Judge Juan Marchand needs to be impeached. He's a state judge. I don't know how he gets impeached. He needs to be removed from the bench and sanctioned. The New York nipple judge, Arthur Engoron, they need to be removed from the bench and sanctioned for their unethical, corrupt conduct. It's not just enough that at the end of the day, the justice is the cessation of the injustice. The people who are at the helm of the committing of this injustice need to be held to account. And that goes for Alvin Bragg. That goes for Leticia James. That goes for Arthur Engoron, the judge in the Leticia James case, and that goes for Juan Marchand, the judge in the Alvin Bragg case. And I dare say it should go for George Soros as well, but I won't hold my breath for that. So it will get overturned. It's just a question of when and on what basis. And then, forget the E. Jean Carroll case out of New York also. Another corrupt bastardizing of the legal system, corruption of the legal system, changing the laws yet again to facilitate the prosecution of one man in particular, Donald Trump. And the judge at the helm of that needs to be impeached and removed from the bench as well. It's just institutionalized corruption and a small bit of justice at the end of the day. The Supreme Court saying those obstruction charges were unconstitutional. That's fine. Everyone who brought those charges, knowing that it was an injustice, should be held to some form of legal account.
Okay, so it will be appealed, but it's a timing issue now. Could he still be sent to jail in the next couple weeks?
I don't think he's going to be sent to jail. Even if he's sentenced to jail, I don't think he's going, they can sentence it and suspend it while he appeals. They could, there's a number of options. I don't think he's going to jail on this regardless. It's first-time offense and maybe a hefty fine, maybe a $500 million fine like Arthur Engeron issued there in New York. I don't know what the limit to the fine might be. I don't think he's going to jail. I don't think he's going to get sentenced to jail. And even if he does get sentenced to, like, I don't know, a day or a week, then they'll suspend it pending his appeal. So I don't think he's going to serve any time or suffer any consequence while he's appealing it, because much like in the Bannon case, I have to check the status of that now, but he'll say suspend the penalty, because if I go to jail, or if I'm ordered to what's the word I'm looking for? Carry out my sentence while I appeal it. If it's overturned on appeal and I've already carried out my sentence, well, it's an illusory appeal. So it'll be suspended pending appeal. But I don't think they're going to sentence him to jail anyhow, because in as insane as they are, Judge Juan Marchand doesn't want the Court of Appeal stepping in right away and humiliating him even more right away. So something, a substantial penalty or a sanction, but not egregious, suspended pending appeal is what I think is going to happen.
Okay, and there's no other legal cases until the election to be worried about then from here.
Let's see here. We got, you're losing track. You had the Colorado removal from the ballot, which was joined up with Maine. That one has been taken care of. You have the RICO case out of Georgia, where the only RICO involved was from the authorities of Georgia, Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade. That is on hold indefinitely because the oral arguments on the appeal or submissions on the appeal are going to be submitted now. No chance that goes to court. You got the E. Jean Carroll $81 million defamation and punitive damages. That's also going to be appealed. But that's, nonetheless, he had to post bond in that. What do you got? You got Engeron, $450 million alleged bank fraud case. That has been issued. That's under appeal. Then you got this one, which was the conviction under appeal. DC documents case, or the DC insurrection case, which I don't see going to trial before the election. And then you got the Florida documents case, which I think is on its death row as well. And Jack Smith might be getting sanctioned for his abuse in there. So no, I think that covers it for what Trump has been going through for the last little while.
All right, and we might get a sprinkle of immunity in from the Supreme Court for good measure.
That would have an impact. That would have an impact on all of them, because if it's a broad immunity ruling, it won't be this broad, but it's the only solution that makes sense to me. If the court comes down and says, in the absence of an impeachment and a conviction, there can be no prosecution of a president once he's out of office. That's the only solution that makes sense. They might come in with something more along the lines of immunity for presidential acts, and there's a sort of a smell test. That will have an impact on pretty much all of the cases, even the New York Juan Marchand case, because all of the alleged disguised fraudulent repayments were done once he was president. And so it'll have an impact on all of them, but we're waiting on that decision with bated breath.
And you think that they will come out with a decision for immunity?
I think they're going to go with not my prediction of what they should do, but the more politically palatable decision. They're going to say, if it's at first glance, it's a presidential act, then he's got immunity. And then they're going to have to go through all of these indictments and say, well, what was an ostensibly or prima facie presidential act, and what was a totally unquestionably personal act? And then they'll have to amend their indictment and whatever. But I think the only thing that makes sense is immunity in the absence of not just impeachment, but conviction, because failing that, nothing's going to stop a rogue DA or a corrupt district attorney from saying, well, that was a purely personal act. When he was challenging the election, it wasn't as president, it was purely a personal act because he, for his own personal benefit. So nothing's going to prevent them from fudging the line that's, supposed to demarcate between official and personal acts. But I think that's where they're going to go, just because it's, it'll be sort of not the splitting the baby, but the reasonable middle ground. But it should just be, in the absence of impeachment and conviction, you don't get to harass a former president for the rest of their life, because it's not just a question of harassing them once they're out of office. It's not premeditated, but preemptive extortion while they're in office. Do this, Letitia James will say, or I'll make your life hell when you get out of office. Yeah.
And it was interesting, even in the debate last night, Trump said that to Biden. He said that you're going to be prosecuted as well for everything that you're doing while you're in office. Right?
He deserves it, but yeah.
Now,
I'd say even when it comes to him, absent a conviction, an impeachment and a conviction, you don't get to harass Joe Biden for the rest of his life once he's out of office.
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. Do we have any dignity left as a country? You mentioned the January 6th decision by the Supreme Court that they did come out with. Can you explain that? Is that relevant? How does that affect what happened?
It was relevant. I forget the tangential way in which it's relevant to Trump, but the bottom line in that case is that a lot of the Jan 6ers were basically charged and convicted of. Now I don't want to make a mistake, and I'm getting confused with a lot of these cases, but they were charged with felony obstruction of congressional proceedings, and the argument was that. The felony obstruction was not just a question of protesting and impeding Congress from counting the electoral votes. It had to do with destruction of evidence. It was basically the Enron form of obstruction. You know something's going on, so you shred evidence, you delete evidence, you intimidate witnesses. Not you peacefully protest, and therefore by protesting, that is felony obstruction, which carries with it a tremendously severe sanction. And again, these idiot TDS afflicted capital D Democrats can't see their, the nose beyond their face. They're like, yeah, stick it to them. Lock up all those Jan 6s on felony obstruction charges for doing nothing more than what progressive lefties did when they protested Kavanaugh, when they protested certain trans laws that they were against, and when they protested gun laws that they were against. So this could just as easily be weaponized against progressive activists as it was against Jan 6ers. And they said, no, that was never the intent of the obstruction charge. It was never intended to merely apply to protest, but specifically certain acts of obstruction, destruction of documents, intimidation of witnesses. What I find curious, I haven't read the dissent as of now, but that Amy Coney Barrett and two others filed dissenting opinions, which I'm curious. I don't know what they dissented on, but it's a big decision. I've become good friends with Adam Johnson, the man who's known as the lectern guy. And this is what a lot of people were charged with as relates to January 6ers. And it was untenable from the beginning, but the process is the punishment, and they've gotten some minor form of justice now, but not after they've had their lives ruined in the process.
Right. Okay. Good. One of the decisions that came down a day or two ago from the Supreme Court was, I think, something that was brought by Missouri, or maybe one of the prosecutors in Missouri. It was really the social media case. And I think it was whether the Biden administration was allowed to go ahead and meddle with the social media companies and maybe violate free speech. And they didn't decide in favor of that. And I was a little disappointed. Now, I know there was an issue, I think, because they couldn't prove the damages. But, we were affected by that massively in 2020 by being deplatformed and censored by things that we put up. That was really a violation of our First Amendment rights, but was being done behind the scenes by our government. What did you make of that decision? And do you think there'll be further decisions in the future that might reverse that? It's
judicial cowardice. So it was Biden versus Missouri, where the Missouri Attorney General was arguing that the Biden administration had basically influenced or coerced social media companies into compliance with government demands, such that those otherwise private companies effectively became state actors for the purposes of those actions. They didn't go after the companies, they went after the government with a temporary restraining order, a TRO, enjoining the government from coercing, influencing, yada, yada, social media companies to carry out government policy, government censorship. They succeeded at the initial level. On appeal, it was sort of pulled back a little bit, but not substantively, because they had a very, very good evidentiary record of government collusion, government coercion, government manipulation of private social media companies to carry out censorship for and on behalf of the government that the government itself would never be allowed to do because of the First Amendment.
Right.
And so remember,
Twitter files, thanks to the Twitter files mainly, right?
Yeah. Twitter files would be the prime example. But we've seen it everywhere. Like they're pressuring Facebook when the Hunter Biden laptop. Well, I mean, this was revealed in the Twitter files, is what you're getting at. Yeah.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.